can't believe somebody's complaining that my camera lens isn't clean. Happy now?
Anything else I can do for you?
Thanks for joining us for another episode of Creation Talk. My name is Joe Tay, and joining me is Dr. Jonathan Safferty from a remote location. As you can see, I'm here alone in our studio. So Dr. Safferty, what are we going to talk about today?
Well, I believe we're going to talk about something that's actually quite close to my heart, you might say, is how did Noah fit all the animals on the ark?
Oh, you're here again! Tidy. Anyway, Dr. Jonathan Safferty. How did he say it? Anyway, this doctor is a young earth creationist who writes articles for Creation Ministries International, a non-profit Christian apologetics ministry. Now, he's got a PhD in chemistry and was New Zealand national chess champion in 1987 and 1988. So not the usual dumbass creationist then, but it does beg the question, how the hell can someone with a PhD in chemistry possibly believe that the earth is only 6,000 years old? Let's find out, shall we? Please subscribe.
Yes, that's interesting. In fact, I have to address something similar during my talks on dinosaurs. And today we're not just talking about dinosaurs, but a similar objection that somebody will always come up to me and say, how can dinosaurs fit on the ark? It's the same thing, how can the animals fit on the ark?
Well, that's not the question I would ask. I'd be more interested in the fact that dinosaurs and humans missed each other by a pretty big margin. The last non-avian dinosaurs went extinct about 65 million years ago at the end of the Cretaceous period. Modern humans, like us, Homo sapiens, have been around for roughly 300,000 years. So we missed crossing paths with dinosaurs by about 65 million years.
And when they raise this objection, I always turn around and I ask them a series of questions. I say, can you tell me how many animals were there? How many dinosaurs were there? What was the average size of an animal? How do they keep these animals on board the ark?
Well, they all seem like pretty stupid questions to be asking a skeptic in the first place, if you don't mind me saying so. But I will do it, just for you. How many animals were on the ark? None. How many of them were dinosaurs? None. What was the average size of the animals? That's irrelevant because see the answers to question 1 and 2. And how did they keep the animals on the ark? Well, the ark never existed. The global flood never happened. So again, it's a redundant question.
And they always turn around and they say that they do not know.
And
so
also, how big was the ark? I mean, the ark was too small to all the animals. Okay, how big was it, do you think? Oh, I don't know. It must have been too small.
Now then, I found this handy-dandy illustration, and according to the biblical account, the ark was 45 feet high, 450 feet long, and 75 feet wide. And from about this point in the video, you're going to see a pattern starting to form throughout his answers. And the pattern is called moving the goalposts. No, I couldn't believe it either.
Yeah, so I turned the question back on them and I showed that if you cannot answer these questions, how can you say that animals can't be on the ark?
Now, I don't want to get too fancy here, but isn't that just a tu quoque fallacy or an appeal to hypocrisy? It's when someone counters an argument or criticism by turning it back onto the accuser, essentially saying, but you do it too. It avoids directly addressing the original point by shifting the focus back to the other person.
So what kind of animals did Noah have to bring on board the ark?
Well, it's a case of looking at the biblical account. It says that all kinds of land vertebrate animals, animals with a backbone. So no congressman allowed. Also all kinds of birds. But the thing is, later on we see that all that breathe through nostrils outside the ark perished, which implies that only things that had nostrils were brought on the ark, which means no insects, because insects don't have nostrils. They breathe through holes in the skin called spiracles through tracheae. So no insects. So that's why I'm saying it's land vertebrate animals. No fish, no whales, also no plants, and no invertebrates. They could have been stowaways, but they weren't obligate passengers.
In the biblical account of Noah's Ark from the book of Genesis, Noah is instructed to bring 2 of every kind of animal, male, female, to keep them alive with him during the flood. Specifically, Genesis mentions 2 of every sort shall come unto thee, to keep them alive, and also of every clean beast thou shalt take thee by 7s, the male and his female, and of beasts that are not clean by 2. the male and his female. So the account suggests a pair of each unclean animal and 7 pairs of each clean animal, which likely refers to the distinction for dietary and sacrificial use as per the traditions at the time. So if you can eat them, bring extra. I wouldn't be worried about the animals I could eat, I'd be worried about the ones that could eat me.
Let's say the penguin, will you say they were on the ark, or you would not know, or what do you think?
I think it's a very fine, but we could probably fit the penguin on if we had to. I'm not sure about that one. I mean, there might be some things which are a leeway. I don't think they had to be on, but maybe they were. I don't think it's going to matter too much compared to the vast number of animals we're talking about.
Oh yeah, there's absolutely no point in getting specific, is there? Especially when you're making a claim as ridiculous as the one you make. So why would we doubt the penguins were on board the ark? I mean, every other animal was, apparently. But as an expert, shouldn't you really know the answer to that?
Okay, so at the very least, we know that the Bible is clear. If they breathe air through their nostrils.
But what about whales, dolphins and porpoises? They are marine mammals that breathe air using lungs, and they've got blowholes on top of their heads that function as nostrils. Another example is the sea turtle, which also has nostrils and breathes air, despite spending most of its time in the ocean. Why were they all left out? Seems a bit unfair to me. And I've got to say, as an expert, you don't really seem to have much expertise about the topic being discussed.
And the Bible talks about created kinds, and what's that? How does that relate to the creatures on the ark?
Oh my word, I am so excited. Are we finally gonna get an answer to the age-old question? What is a kind? Maybe I'll have to send this video to Kent Hovind and Matt Powell.
Well, you might say, I think we've done videos on these before, which we can put in the show notes below the video. About kinds versus species, the fact that the kind is much broader than what's now called a species, even though the kind would originally have been a single species, but now many species, probably many genera. A genera is the next level above a species, so probably, I think all of us think that in most cases the kind is equivalent to a family, but that's a sort of rule of thumb, not a hard and fast rule.
Now, in the context of the story of Noah's Ark, a kind seems to indicate a broader classification than species. For example, it would have been impractical for Noah to take aboard every single species as we define them today. No, really? The implication is that he took a representative creature that could reproduce and fulfill the command to be fruitful and multiply after the flood. Now then, modern horses, rhinos and tapirs belong to a biological group or kind called Perissodactyla, also known as odd-toed ungulates. So using your own definition of kind, that means a rhino and a horse can mate, or a zebra and a tapir. Checkmate, creationists. And if microphones weren't expensive, I'd probably drop one right about now.
Okay, so it's just a classification system. I think in Genesis 1, the Bible tells us that God created the creatures to reproduce after their own kind.
Yes.
I think around 10 times or so in Genesis 1.
Well, now I don't want to toot my own horn or anything, even though that's exactly what I'm about to do, but I think that the point I just made completely blows that idea out of the water.
So we already said that these are creatures with a backbone, vertebrate creatures that were on board the ark. So the insects like beetles and things like that, how would they have survived the flood?
Well, I mean, when we think about what the flood would do, it'd also rip up lots of vegetation rafts, that's one thing, and they can persist for a long time. It's interesting that Darwin himself did experiments. He floated some things on driftwood.
While there isn't a detailed record of experiments with insects and driftwood specifically attributed to Darwin, he did consider the possibility of insects being transported across water on driftwood, and in his observations he noted that floating trees and other vegetative material could carry snails and other small animals. Not really sure how citing Charles Darwin is going to help you with your position though, so let's see what he's got to say.
For months on end, just to show that he was trying to prove that things could get from South America to Galapagos by floating on things. But in fact, he was also inadvertently supporting the flood account. He also submerged seeds in salt water for months and found they could still germinate. Again, he wasn't trying to prove the flood account, he was trying to prove a migration account, but that's consistent with the biblical account of, landing on Ararat and dispersing?
Does it though? Really? Or is it that you've read Charles Darwin's work, seen the word water, and thought, floods have got lots of water. I'm going to say Charles Darwin proved the flood and hope nobody notices that they are completely unrelated.
So you mentioned that's maybe somewhere between the created kind would be somewhere between what we call the family or even the genre. So how many creatures would that be?
Well, I think not as many as people think. I mean, because most of them, when they talk about millions of species, a lot of them plants, a lot of them marine creatures, a lot of them are insects, and that's not relevant for what we are talking about. So the number of land vertebrates is a lot smaller.
6,000 years ago, which is around 4000 BCE, would still place us well within the Holocene epoch, a period that began approximately 11,700 years ago after the last major ice age. The number of land vertebrate species at that time wouldn't have been dramatically different from the number of species today, although there would have certainly been extinctions and possibly some speciation since then. So how many were there? Mammals, over 6,400 species. Birds, over 10,000 species. Reptiles, over 10,000 species. So that's 26,400 species or kinds that fit into your land vertebrate category. Multiply that by 2 and you've got 52,800. And that's before we even allow for the unclean animals, you know, the ones that you had to bring 7 of each of, which would make it an even bigger number. And you're surprised that people struggle to believe that a guy and his family managed to get almost 60,000 animals, including dinosaurs, onto a homemade wooden boat.
I mean, in fact, John Woodmarappy was generous. He assumed that the kind was a genus, in which case he calculated about 16,000 animals max would be on board. If the kind was about a family, probably about 2,000 animals max were on board.
You know, it always makes me laugh whenever I make a video reacting to young Earth creationists, and this guy is a little bit different because he is genuinely a PhD in chemistry. But why is it that whenever they quote numbers like the numbers he's just quoted, and then I go and look those numbers up for myself and verify what I find, they never match?
You think he plans it all out? Just makes it up as he goes along.
So what about dinosaurs? Aren't they too big to have them on board the Ark?
Well, first of all, how big was the Ark is the other question to answer, isn't it? So.
Oh yeah, so how big was it?
Well, the Bible told us 300 cubits. This is a cubit. Cubits is Latin for elbow. Now, if you get a blood draw from here, this is called a cubit or fossa. Okay, just use information for you. So 300 cubits long, 50 cubits wide.
So it's exactly the size I said it was earlier then?
Yes, that's
Pretty
right.
big.
This is massive. Yes. In fact, the storage capacity will be, how much was it again? Like 522 railroad carts, but I guess it depends on who you ask, right?
Well, I think that's about the standards, the sort of standard US railroad stock car. That would be 522. I've also calculated as a standard semi-trailer size.
Now, I've done some calculations as well, using the dimensions given to us by the biblical account of Noah's Ark. Not sure why you didn't do the same. So, the Ark would have had 1,518,750 cubic feet of storage. Now, to calculate the exact number of animals that space could house is really tricky for an idiot like me, but if we take the African elephant as an example, well, it could house 152 of those, or sheep, 75,000 would fit in there, or 2,373 lions, provided you don't want to give any of these animals space to move around. Now, this does bring up another question, and I, for one, have never heard any creationist mention it. Where was all the food kept? And how much of it was on board? What about water for the animals to drink? Because you can't drink seawater. Where and how was that stored? Who was on poopy patrol? And where the hell were they putting all that? When it comes to Noah's Ark, there are so many factors that would come into play if it had actually been a real event. It blows my mind that even creationists would say they believe it.
So Jono, so you said there's about 50 to 60 kind of dinosaurs. So that's about 100 to 120 dinosaurs on the Ark.
Right.
But wouldn't they still be too big? I mean, how big were these creatures?
Oh, some of them were really massive for sure, the biggest land creatures of all time, but where does it say that Noah had to take on the full-grown ones?
Well, that's a new one even for me. Noah took dinosaurs on the Ark. Oh, but they wouldn't fit. Ah, yes, he only took baby ones. This guy's got a PhD, man. Look him up for yourself. He really has.
So, but how would the 8 people that were on board the ark, Noah, his wife, his 3 sons, 3 wives, 8 of them, how would they care for all these creatures? I mean, even if we have 2,000 to 16,000 animals, isn't that a lot of work?
Well, I mean, farmers have always had been outnumbered greatly by the animals under their care. Even when they bring them in over the winter to shelter them, they've always been outnumbered by the animals long before there's modern technology available.
Yeah, well, I've got to agree with you there. You're right. Farmers have always been hugely outnumbered by the animals they care for. But can you give me an example of a cow trying to eat the farmer, or a sheep attacking a farmer and tearing him limb from limb? No, I didn't think so.
But what about the water? Doesn't the water, I mean, do you have like the gutter system, or how do you think they would have?
I mean, again, you see animal feed system where you have a central filling station of grain which goes in from a filling station by gravity into a trough, and same with water from a central filling station into the trough. I don't think you need it'll take a lot of work to build those things, but once they're in place, they're fairly low maintenance sort of systems.
You're doing this on purpose now, and you and I, for one, had no idea the ark was so high-tech. You hear yourself. Now, for a guy with a PhD, you don't have to say some really stupid things, and I'm going to use elephants because they are probably the biggest animals that were on the ark. The average elephant consumes around 50 gallons of water a day just to survive, so 2 elephants is 100 gallons. Multiply that by 365, which is 36,500 gallons just for the elephants. And 36,500 gallons weighs roughly 152 tons. Now, we would have to be fair to the other animals. I mean, they'll get thirsty as well, so let's triple that. You actually think, and keep in mind we haven't even mentioned what the animals themselves would weigh, but you honestly believe that a homemade wooden boat could carry that sort of weight? What the hell am I saying? I answered that as if I actually believed that the global flood happened. Anyway, that's enough stupid for one day, even for me. Thank you all so much to these lovely people who all pledge money each month to support what I do here on YouTube. Remember, if you want to help, all the ways in which you can are listed below this video. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'm gonna go and have a lay down, I think. Oh, you're still here then. I hope you enjoyed this video and maybe even learned something new. If you did, then you'll probably enjoy this video as well. Don't forget to hit the like button if you haven't already, and subscribe if you're new. And I will see you all again very soon, or in a few minutes if you do decide to watch this recommended video. Love you, bye.